After 25 years on that bench, people always assumed I was made of steel, cold, sharp, no nonsense. And most days, they weren't wrong. I built a career on cutting through nonsense, on saying what others were too polite to say, on not letting anyone waste my time or play games in my courtroom. I was proud of that reputation. I still am. But there was one Tuesday morning in April that cracked something open in me that I wasn't expecting. A little girl walked into my courtroom holding her father's hand, and she said 4 words that stopped me cold. She said, "My daddy cries every night." And I, Judge Judy, the woman who has made grown men cry on national television without blinking, went completely silent. I want to tell you exactly what happened because this is a story I've been carrying for a long time. It's a story about love, about struggle, and about what justice actually means when you strip away all the pomp and procedure. And before I go any further, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now because the stories I share on this channel are not the ones you'll see anywhere else. This is the real work. Stay with me. I spent 25 years on the family court bench in Manhattan before the television show. 25 years of seeing humanity at its most raw, custody battles, abuse cases, families falling apart, and sometimes, just sometimes, finding their way back together. People think courtrooms are cold places, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of them are. But mine never was. Sharp, yes. Fast, absolutely. I don't have patience for nonsense, never did. But cold? No. I grew up in Queens. My father was a dentist. My mother was a force of nature who could silence a room with one look, a talent I apparently inherited. I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a lawyer and then a judge. Not because I wanted power, but because I believed, deeply, genuinely believed that the law, used correctly, could be the greatest equalizer this country has. It could look a rich man and a poor man in the eye and treat them exactly the same. That idea lit me up at 15, and it never stopped. My husband, Jerry, has been beside me for decades. He is the steady hand to my quick temper, the patience to my impatience. He has talked me down from ledges and talked me back into rooms and never once asked me to be anything other than exactly who I am. That matters more than I can say. That particular Tuesday morning, I had a full docket. Traffic matters, small civil disputes, parking violations, the kind of cases that people dismiss as minor. I never dismissed them because here's what I learned early. To the person standing in front of you, nothing about their situation is minor. It is their life. It is happening to them right now. I was working through the morning when I looked at one file and paused. A man named Daniel Reyes, 3 unpaid parking violations, same street, always Tuesday or Thursday mornings, $45 each, $210 total with fees. On paper, unremarkable. But I have a nose for patterns, and that pattern told me there was a story. When his name was called, he walked in. Young man, early 30s, lean, tired around the eyes, wearing a button-down shirt that had been carefully ironed. I noticed things like that. The effort people make to show up with dignity, I always noticed that. And he was holding the hand of a little girl. She was maybe 4, maybe 5. Dark, curly hair with a yellow hair tie, little sunflower on it, white dress, blue flowers. And she was holding a stuffed rabbit pressed to her chest like it was the most important thing in the world. She was looking around my courtroom like she owned the place. Big eyes wide open, not scared at all, just curious. I've had children in my courtroom before. It happens. But something about this little girl stopped me before she said a single word. It was the way she was holding her father's hand, not the way a scared child holds on for comfort. She was holding his hand the way a protector holds on. This tiny person in a sundress was there to take care of her dad. I saw that in 3 seconds, and something in my chest moved. I said, "Good morning, you're Daniel Reyes." He said, "Yes, Your Honor." He looked me straight in the eye. I appreciate that. Don't come into my courtroom and stare at the floor. Look at me. I said, "And who is this?" He looked down at her and smiled the way only a parent smiles. That particular smile that breaks through even when everything else is hard. He said, "This is my daughter, Sophia." I looked at Sophia and said, "Good morning, Sophia." She looked right back at me very seriously and said, "Good morning, Judge," like she'd been rehearsing it, like this was important business and she was ready. I heard the ripple go through the courtroom, that little wave of warmth. Even my courtroom smiled. I looked at the file and said, "Mr. Reyes, 3 violations, same block, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Talk to me." He nodded. He said, Your Honor, I park there twice a week because it's the closest spot to the school where Sophia has her therapy program. She has a speech delay. The program runs 2 hours and 45 minutes. The parking limit is 1 hour. I can't leave her in the middle of a session. I can't afford the garage. It's $12 each time. I've looked for another solution. There isn't one. I put the file down. You stay the whole time? I asked. Yes, Your Honor. I wait outside, sometimes in the car, sometimes on the bench near the entrance. And work? I said. He paused. The way people pause when the answer is hard. He said, I was a line cook. The restaurant closed 3 months ago. I've been doing grocery delivery when I can get shifts. I'm trying. He said it quietly. No performance, no plea for sympathy, just a statement of fact from a man who was running out of runway and hadn't stopped moving. I know that look. I spent 25 years in family court. I have seen that look 10,000 times, and it never stopped meaning something to me. And then Sophia tugged on her father's hand. He looked down at her. She looked up at him with those enormous eyes. And then she looked straight up at me. No hesitation, no filter, just complete honesty. And she said, My daddy cries every night. I want to be clear about something. I am not a soft touch. I am not the judge who tears up at every sad story. I have been called ruthless. I have been called tough. I have been called a lot of things, most of them by people who deserved exactly what they got in my courtroom. But those 4 words from that little girl hit me somewhere that nothing had hit me in a very long time. I took my glasses off. I set them down on the bench. I pressed my fingers against my eyes for one moment because here's the thing about children. They don't know how to lie about what matters. They haven't learned yet. She wasn't strategizing. She wasn't trying to manipulate me. She didn't even fully understand what she was doing. She was just telling the truth the way children tell it, completely, cleanly, without apology. And the truth she was telling was about love, about watching her father carry something heavy and wanting someone to know. Now, let me stop here for just a second. If this story is already getting to you, and I have a feeling it is, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. I looked at Daniel Reyes. He was looking down at his daughter with an expression I recognized immediately. A father undone by how much his child sees, the love and the pain living in his face at the same time. He reached down and gently put his hand on her hair and said softly, It's okay, mija. I cleared my throat. I said, Mr. Reyes, you're carrying a lot right now. He looked up at me. His jaw tightened slightly. That thing people do when they are absolutely not going to fall apart in public. He said, Yes, Your Honor, but we're going to be okay. And I believed him. Not because things were easy, because I believed he was the kind of man who would make it true through sheer stubbornness. The iron shirt told me that. The way he stood told me that. The way he'd been showing up to that therapy center twice a week in all weather and sitting outside on a bench told me that. I looked at the file, $210. People hear that number and they think, that's nothing. And for some people, it is nothing. But I have sat across from enough people in enough courtrooms to know that for a man doing grocery delivery shifts to cover his rent, $210 is not a fine. It is a month of groceries. It is his daughter's shoes. It is the difference between keeping the lights on and not. My father used to say that the law exists to serve people. The moment it stops serving people, it stops being just. I have believed that my entire career. I looked at Daniel. I looked at Sophia, who had found something fascinating on the wall and was staring at it with full commitment, rabbit tucked under her arm. I said, Mr. Reyes, I've been on this bench a long time. I can read a person quickly, and what I see is a man who is doing everything right in a situation that is making everything hard. He pressed his lips together. His eyes were bright. He nodded once. I said, the fines are dismissed. All 3, every single one. The sound that went through my courtroom, it was an exhale, the whole room breathing out at once when something feels right. Daniel looked at me, and I watched him try to find words. He opened his mouth, closed it. He blinked several times. He said, Your Honor, I don't know how to thank you. I said, Don't thank me. You go home and you take care of that little girl. That's thanks enough. And then Sophia turned from whatever had fascinated her on the wall, looked up at her father and said, Daddy, is it good? He laughed, a real, full, from the chest laugh, the kind that only comes when real relief breaks through. He picked her up and held her against him and said, "Yes, baby, it's good." She patted his face with her small hand and said, "I knew it." I looked down at my papers. I needed a moment, and I wasn't going to give the courtroom the satisfaction of seeing why. My clerk handed me a tissue without a word. She knows me. After all those years, she knows. I watched Daniel Reyes walk out with Sophia on his hip, her little legs swinging, her rabbit flopping. And I sat there and I thought about every parent I'd ever seen in a courtroom, in family court, in my own courtroom, carrying things they never asked for help with, fighting for their children with everything they had and then going home and falling apart quietly in the dark. The afternoon continued, more cases, but I kept coming back to those 4 words. My daddy cries every night. Then around 2 how, a young woman came in. Her name was Angela Moretti. She had a parking ticket, but my clerk had flagged her file. The note said she had additional information to present. She stood before me and said, "Your Honor, I'm Daniel Reyes' sister." I put my pen down. She said, "I was in the courtroom this morning with my nephew. I'd brought Sophia in because Daniel was getting the car from the garage. I heard everything. I heard what she said. And I came back this afternoon because I need you to know who my brother is." I said, "Go ahead." She said, "Daniel has been raising Sophia alone since she was 18 months old. Her mother left when Sophia was diagnosed with the speech delay. She couldn't handle it. She walked out and she hasn't come back. Daniel has done everything himself. Every appointment, every therapy session, never missed one in 3 years. He reads to her every night. He learned the therapy techniques so he can practice them with her at home. He cuts the crusts off her sandwiches because she doesn't like them. He finds the butterfly clips for her hair because she loves butterflies. She paused. He never talks about how hard it is. Not to me, not to our mother, not to anyone. He just does it. But Sophia hears him at night when he thinks she's asleep. She hears him. I didn't say a word. I just listened. Angela said, "I'm not here to fight my ticket. I'll pay whatever it is. I just needed you to know who he is. Because this morning, when Sophia said that and I saw your face, I knew you understood. But he deserves to be fully seen. He has been invisible for so long." I took a breath. I said, "Your ticket is dismissed." She started to thank me and I held up my hand. I said, "Your brother is not invisible. Not to that little girl, not to you, and not to me. You go home tonight and you tell him that. You tell him he is doing an extraordinary job. And you tell him the law he was worried about today is no longer his concern." She covered her mouth with her hand. She nodded. She said, "Thank you, Your Honor." I said, "Thank you for coming back. That took guts." She smiled through her tears and walked out. My clerk set fresh coffee beside me and said nothing. That's the mark of someone who truly knows you. I sat there and I thought about the quiet heroism that exists in this world. The people who show up every day and do the hard thing and the right thing and never get a headline for it, never get a ceremony, never get seen. If you believe those people deserve to be seen, if that idea means something to you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. Because that is exactly what this channel is about. Real people, real stories, real justice. Don't miss a single one. My father used to say you can tell everything about a person's character by how they behave when no one is watching. Daniel Reyes had been behaving with extraordinary character for 3 years. In parking lots and therapy waiting rooms and late at night when his daughter was almost asleep and nobody was watching, except she was. 3 days later, my clerk knocked on my chamber's door with a small smile, the kind that means something good. She said, "Mr. Reyes and his daughter are here to see you." I said, "Send them in." Daniel came through the door in a navy shirt, carefully ironed. Sophia came in beside him, yellow sunflower hair tie, stuffed rabbit, the same wide, fearless eyes. She grinned at me like I was an old friend she'd been expecting. I stood up. I almost never do that. I'm not sure why I did it that day. Some occasions simply require it. Daniel said, "I hope it's okay that we came." I said, "Sit down." He said, "I wanted to thank you in person, not just for the fines, for listening." "You actually listened." I said, that's the job." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "After we left on Tuesday, I sat in the car before I started driving. Sophia was in her car seat eating crackers, and I sat there thinking about what she said in your courtroom." He paused. "I didn't know she heard me. I thought I was quiet enough. I thought she was always asleep." He looked at his hands. "I'm going to do better. I don't want her carrying that weight. She's already working so hard." I said, "Can I tell you something?" He said, "Of course." I said, The fact that she heard you and then walked into that courtroom holding your hand like she was there to protect you, that is not a sign that you're failing. That is a sign that she loves you completely. Children don't protect people they're afraid of. They protect people they love. Don't take that away from her by hiding everything. Let her love you. He looked at me for a long moment. I watched something shift in his eyes. He said, I never thought about it that way. I said, I have a feeling that little girl is going to keep surprising you for the rest of your life. He smiled, a real one. And then Sophia, who had been listening to all of this with her very serious face, leaned forward and held her rabbit out across my desk toward me. She said, you can hold him. He's nice. I want to tell you something. I have received awards and recognition. I have been called one of the most influential women in television. I have had a lot of impressive moments in a long career. None of it, not one moment of it, moved me the way that little girl holding out a worn, stuffed rabbit moved me. I reached across the desk and I took him. Gently, I said, what's his name? She said, very seriously, Mr. Flop? I said, Mr. Flop is excellent company. I'm honored. She nodded, satisfied, then held her hand out and I gave him back. She tucked him under her arm where he belonged. Daniel shook my hand, firm and warm. He said, thank you, Your Honor, for Tuesday and for today. I said, take care of her and take care of yourself. Both things matter. He said, I will. I believed him. Sophia looked back at me from the doorway and waved with her whole arm, the way children wave, with complete commitment. Then she disappeared around the corner. I sat back down. I looked at the stack of files on my desk, the work that never fully ends, and I thought about what this job has asked of me, not the television show, not the fame, but the actual work. The work of looking at a person and seeing them truly, not their violation, not their record, not the legal facts, but who they are, what they love, what they're fighting for. About 3 weeks later, I heard that Daniel had been hired. A restaurant downtown, reopening after a renovation, needed an experienced line cook, full-time benefits. The schedule gave him Tuesday and Thursday mornings free. I sat with that for a while. Quiet joy, not the loud kind. The kind that settles in your chest and stays there. The kind that makes you think, yes, this is how it's supposed to go. $210, that is what stood between that man and a harder road. $210 could have meant a suspended license, which would have meant no rides to therapy, which would have meant gaps in Sophia's treatment, which would have meant slower progress for a little girl who was already working so hard. One domino. That's how fragile some lives are. That's why every case matters. That's why I never phoned it in, not once in 25 years. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, stories from the real courtroom, the real work, the moments that don't make the highlight reel, but make the career, subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell. I have more of them, more mornings, more people, more moments that reminded me exactly why I put on those robes every single day. A few months later, I ran into them at a community event. Sophia had grown. She was talking more of a lot more. Her sessions were working. She ran up to me without hesitation and said, Judge, like she'd been expecting me. I crouched down and said, Sophia, you look wonderful. She said, I know, with such total, unshakable confidence that I laughed from somewhere deep in my chest. Daniel shook my hand and told me things were going well. He looked different, rested, lighter. The exhaustion from April was gone. He told me his daughter had just been evaluated and her therapist used the word remarkable. He said it slowly, like he was still learning how to hold it. I said, try. She's a remarkable kid. He said, she really is. I said, she gets it from somewhere. He looked away, cleared his throat, and said, I'm working on deserving that. I said, I think you're further along than you realize. We said goodbye. I watched him walk away with Sophia skipping beside him, telling him something with great enthusiasm and sweeping hand gestures. He was listening to her with his complete and total attention, just fully there. I stood there for a moment after they disappeared into the crowd. This job, the real job, not the TV show, gave me something no title ever could. It kept me connected to human life in all its forms. The struggling and the striving, the falling and the getting back up. The moments when people show you who they really are, not through speeches or presentations, but through small, unguarded, absolutely real moments, like a little girl holding out a worn, stuffed rabbit across a judge's desk because she wants to share the best thing she has. People have asked me over the years if I was too tough, too sharp, not soft enough. I'll tell you what I think. I think being fair and being compassionate are not opposites. I think the law must have a spine, and I provided one every single day I was on that bench. But a spine without a heart is just a stick. The law is meant to serve justice. And justice sometimes looks like a man being truly seen by another person who actually gives a damn. That's what happened that Tuesday morning in April, and I have never forgotten it. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone in your life who is carrying weight quietly, who shows up every day and does the work and never asks for recognition, share this with them. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it right now, because I have more stories from that bench, and every single one of them matters. I'm Judge Judy. I spent decades on the bench because I believe in one simple thing. The law belongs to everyone. Every person who walks through those courtroom doors, rich or poor, holding it together or barely hanging on, deserves to be seen, heard, and treated as a full human being. That's what makes this work matter. That's what makes it worth it every single time.